Our second inductee this evening will be Scott Hecker, class of 1973. Jean Piaget once said, who was a Swiss-born French psychologist, "The principal goal of education is to create men who are capable of doing new things, not simply of repeating what other generations have done. Men who are creative, inventive, and discoverers." That's you, Scott. Tonight, presenting Scott is Eugene Moore. Eugene Moore currently is a teacher at Olmsted Falls High School and has been for well over 30 years in the biology and in advanced biology departments. He's past chair of the science department, and he has supported and coached many state championship biology teams. He is a Strongsville resident. He has 2 children. His wife, Cindy, was also a teacher at Olmsted Falls High School in the phys ed department. And, of course, he was Scott's teacher at one point in time, as well as several of us in this room tonight. So please welcome Gene.
I will try to be brief, though, Bob. I'm going to read this as quickly as I can because I had a lot of things I wanted to say tonight about Scotty. God, I hope you don't mind I still call you Scotty. You'll always be that to me. What an opportunity to be here tonight to celebrate the achievements of one of my favorite students. It's truly an honor to be here among such a distinguished group. I think that went on our rights, Bob. To share with all of you the story of Scott Hecker. It was my first year teaching here in Olmsted Falls, the fall of 1969. And there he was, sitting right in the middle of my biology class, a carrot-top 9th grader with that infectious smile that if you know Scott, you know what I'm talking about. Scott's passion for nature soon caught my attention. I quickly learned that while he lived on Water Street, not far from the Olmsted Park and river, his real home was in any nearby woods or field, especially the woods off No Bottom Road, which was a woods back then, or on his aunt's farm in Pennsylvania. After each of his outings, Scott would always return home to his studio in his house to capture his observations and his drawings. Even then, Scott's ability to capture nature in his drawings and photographs was already becoming well known throughout the local area. Scott eventually became quite an entrepreneur, selling his artwork and photos to eager buyers. In fact, he hit me for 25 bucks for a Hecker original. Remember that one, Scott? Actually, I take credit for being smart enough back then, one of the few smart things I've ever done in my life, to recognize that Scott someday was going to be famous. But back then, I didn't know the word computer, so I guess I couldn't have even imagined it. When I went online the other day and I did a Google search for Scott Hecker, I found his drawings available from collectors for purchase online, including one of my favorites, which I see sitting up there on the table of the baby bunnies. Scott was fortunate to receive the tutelage of Miss Kamenovich, our art teacher at that time. Miss Kamenovich, she recognized and helped to cultivate Scott's talents. They developed a special relationship, 2 of them. In fact, a picture painted by Miss Kamenovich hangs in the back of the high school auditorium, if you ever noticed it. And guess who's featured in the center of the classroom scene? Hard to miss that red hair, Scott. I talked to Miss Kamenovich, and she wanted to be here tonight when Scott called me last spring and asked me to present him. But they already had plans to be in New Zealand. She did, however, Scott, send me a letter that she wanted me to read tonight. So this is what she wrote. There is a framed color photograph hanging in my home which captures the vivid image of a raccoon's footprint among scattered fall-colored leaves. It represents one of Scott's early photographic efforts and has held a place of honor in my home for well over 30 years. I've always felt blessed that Scott chose to give it to me. I had to pay 25 bucks. Anyway, in the course of a career, there are circumstances, events, and particularly individuals who remain indelibly etched in one's mind, heart, or both. Scott Hecker is such an individual for me. He is that unforgettable art student, the one that, upon remembering, never fails to bring a smile. Scott had such a curious mind, a truly aesthetic spirit, and a gentle, soft, yet strong heart. His smile was contagious, and he brightened the classroom each day in which he entered it. I extend my sincere congratulations to Scott for his induction into the Olmsted Falls Hall of Fame, for his personal accomplishments in his career, and most importantly for his efforts on behalf of all of us for the conservation of shorebirds. Best wishes to you, Scott. I just wish I could have joined you. Keep up the good work and remember your roots now and always. Smiling with and at you, Kathleen L. Kamenovich. Scott had a lot of impact on the faculty there in that building. In fact, Scott had a big impact on me. It was Scott who first got me interested in photography back then, as we would take frequent hikes into the metro parks and other natural areas in and around Olmsted. Eventually, as recorded in his journal, I wound up spending a major portion of my $6,000 starting salary for cameras, lenses, and clothing for our outings. During those years, Scott showed me so many things I never knew. My favorite times were the hours we spent watching kit foxes at their den on the river bottom below No Bottom Road. We also climbed trees to photograph baby owls and hawks. And before I forget, Scott, I want to thank you once again for sending me up that 40-foot tulip tree and not telling me about that mother hawk that wanted to get her talons into me and knock me out of that tree. I'm hanging on by a thread up there looking at my life passing in front of my eyes, and he's on the ground laughing. And there's nothing between me and the ground but 40 feet of space. I didn't know I could shinny down a tree that fast. I was pretty good at it. Scott's tour of duty in Olmsted culminated with his graduation in 1973 and his subsequent departure from Olmsted Falls to follow the path that would eventually lead him to tonight's festivities. Working initially as a freelance wildlife illustrator and photographer, Scott saw his photos and drawings appear in the brochures of the Massachusetts Audubon Society, trail guides of the U.S. National Park Service, the brochures for the International Crane Foundation, not to mention National Geographic and numerous other publications. Upon Scott's eventual arrival at the University of Florida, he continued his interest in biological illustration. From 1979 to 81, Scott attended Prescott College, completing his bachelor's degree. While there, he served as assistant director of admissions, redesigned Prescott's publicity materials, taught courses in biological illustration, and assisted with courses in field ornithology and photography. By 2002, he had received his Master's of Science from Antioch University. There, his focus was wetland conservation in Belize, which on one of his visits, Scott pointed out to me that Belize is in Central America. As a grad student, he also taught courses in natural history illustration, coastal bird ecology, and conservation challenges. During this time, Scott was engaged in developing natural history trips and international expeditions for the Massachusetts Audubon Society to Belize, Guatemala, the Amazon, and Galapagos Islands. In 1984, Scott became the director of the bird conservation and coastal waterbird programs for the Massachusetts Audubon Society, charged with the protection of their coastal shorebirds. Scott's training in field research was invaluable as he spent years of field work mapping and studying beach nesting plovers and terns. His work led to major changes in the management of off-road vehicles and erosion control practices in Massachusetts to protect the breeding populations of beach nesting species along the Atlantic coast. Scott had a lead role in initiating and drafting guidelines for barrier beach management in Massachusetts, and through his efforts, he was able to raise approximately $3.6 million for Massachusetts bird conservation program. His research program and fundraising efforts led to the recovery of threatened endangered shorebirds. For example, as a result of his work, the population of piping plovers increased from 126 pairs in 1987 to 530 pairs by 2002. In recognition of his work, the Thornton Burgess Society selected Scott as the 1995 Massachusetts Conservationist of the Year. This honor was followed in 1998 by his selection for the Coastal Visionary Award from the Gulf of Maine Council. An interesting highlight of his career occurred in 1996 when Scott got the opportunity to strike up a friendship with Mr. Rogers. Largely as a result of that relationship, Mr. Rogers later donated his beach property in Nantucket to support Scott's coastal bird conservation work. The most recent highlight of his illustrious career occurred in March 11, 2003, when Scott was invited to join the National Audubon Society as Director of Coastal Bird Conservation. Scott now oversees conservation efforts to protect and restore threatened coastal bird populations for the entire Western Hemisphere. According to Audubon Senior Vice President Frank Gill, quote, "We're thrilled to be working with Scott. He brings a great range of experience and successful accomplishments to Audubon. And we know that our work on coastal water birds will be greatly enhanced due to Scott's proven abilities." Scott's career is a testament to a key verse of one of my favorite songs from the 1983 Academy Award-winning movie, Flashdance, a line that truly describes the life of this bulldog. I don't know how many of you remember that movie, and I'm old enough to, but one of the lines in there, sung by Irene Cara, went, "Take your passion and make it happen." And Scott has done just that. He has made his passion into a lifelong career. Scott has traveled to Guatemala to study the rainforests and the Mayan civilizations. He has canoed various sections of the Yukon River, which Scott pointed out to me is in Alaska. And to placate his romantic side, he's retraced the travels of Don Quixote across Spain by horseback. Scott's life has embraced the spirit of adventure the rest of us wish we possessed. This modern-day adventurer is more at home in the wilds than he ever was here in Olmsted Falls. Scott has made a career of protecting and preserving nature and works to reveal those wonders through his art to the rest of us. Scott has distinguished himself in Olmsted Falls by making a real and valuable difference in our world. I'm proud to present for induction to the Olmsted Falls Distinguished Alumni Hall of Fame a bulldog, former student, my friend, and my mentor, Scott Hecker.
Wow. I'm overwhelmed. I mean, I haven't lived here since I graduated from high school. And that was just such a wonderful program by Mr. Moore. I met Mr. Moore when he was, how old were you then? In your early, how young? 21, unbelievable. I thought, I just couldn't believe this biology teacher right out of college, and he was the toughest teacher I think I ever had. But I think that that's one of the reasons many of his students have really admired him. He was truly a mentor in this high school, and it was a very important part of my life then when I was in the 9th grade, and throughout my high school career I literally invented classes for myself, independent studies in biology, to keep working with him through my entire high school career, as well as with Miss Kamenovich in the art department. I was really kind of a poor student, or an average student, except in biology and art. And it was really to their credit that I focused on those things, and so many people, in addition to the teachers here, my family and everyone supported my wacky ideas of being an artist. Not exactly the greatest career choice probably, but they encouraged me enough to stick with it. And when I went right into college at the University of Florida. I chose a school where they actually taught biological illustration, which was uncommon at that time. And I was always encouraged to pursue my primary goals and love, I guess, art and nature. And many people in this town supported me, all my family members and cousins and aunts and uncles. My Aunt Dorothy nominated me for this award, I know. And I regret that she died this past summer and wasn't able to see this, but Dorothy Hecker was the librarian at the school when I was there. And my grandmother was a graduate of the Cleveland Institute of Art, and she lived until last year at 101 and taught some of the people in this room, I'm sure. But I had many, many mentors in Olmsted. Dan Waugh, I think you know, the Nature Rambles writer. I went down to Turkey Foot Cemetery today and saw, you know, many of the graves of all these people I'm talking about, and saw some of the old trees and the places along the river that I grew up with here. I mean, I really had a wonderful childhood in Olmsted Falls, and didn't really expect to just charge off to the rest of the world. It just so happens that I'm the oldest of 7, but the only one who graduated from Olmsted. We all went to Florida, and I had a few years at the University of Florida where I focused more on my biological illustration type of work, and then to Arizona to finish college there, on for a master's up in New Hampshire at Antioch, and just kept going. I'm all over the world, and have had a long, long career with the Audubon Society, which was my dream when I was young. So I'm very, very happy that my childhood and everybody here kind of pushed me in the direction that was really the center of my life when I was a child. It's been great, and I want to thank everyone who's here on my behalf. My family, my parents are here, my brother, many cousins, aunts and uncles, my own family, my children, my fiance. Thank you so much. And Greg Kern, my best friend when I was in school here. Today he brought a little package from my son Noel, who's 8, kind of my little shadow now. Greg brought some fossils that we collected together as kids, because I had my fossil collection in the school one time, and unfortunately it disappeared while I was at school, and I don't have any of those fossils. But Greg brought some in today to give to me and to Noel, and not to mention some old coins. We used to collect coins together here. I used to go up to the First National Bank, and I was kind of a little bit of a nuisance, I know, because I'd go in there with $1, go to the counter, get 2 rolls of pennies, dump them out on the counter, go through them, go back to the counter, get another 2 rolls of pennies. They finally asked me to do it outside, so I was on the front step, which was even worse. And for entertainment, we put some on the railroad tracks to have them flattened if they weren't that valuable, you know. But anyway, Olmsted was just the greatest place to grow up if you love nature, and I also thank everybody here for keeping it pretty much that way. It hasn't changed much over all these years, and that's a special thing I think I want to mention. And but I've gone on in that, you know, in the field that I've enjoyed, and I'm just honored to be here. So thank you very much.